question, or they might have to die. But my shit wasn't the only one, and it wasn't just the gun. Shit, we was all dying babies. Mom solved the confusion. We was still pregnant. This shit was just an illusion. Cause my whole heart was losing. They said it was established. I guess they came to that conclusion. Like we left up around 9, standing in place became a crime. We kept lying. And us niggas, we just kept dying. Peacefully, we was trying. Rakia Boyd, Ayana Jones, Tiffany Edwards, Sarita Ray. These are the names that they hope we never know. My homework wasn't sure if I should stay or go, but the police gave me the answers for all my questions. That's the kick ass. Well, here I am. I'm not in Ferguson, but I feel the need to constantly scream at the top of my lungs. Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Fuck what you thought was the truth. Hands up! Don't shoot! There was glass everywhere. The smell of blood and salt. We were lost. Nothing was familiar anymore. This is not how I spent my childhood. Where the fuck was my home? I left the corner wars to a wrong. Stolen, taken, we were hungry. Sorry for justice. Pulling on each other and realizing that this system was reckless. Our unity was one of our biggest lessons. So we stood and we screamed. Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Fuck what you thought was the truth. Hands up! Don't. And they were still shooting, and we kept yelling, hands up, don't shoot, and they said the president was really stealing the shit that was already on. They told me that we had come so far from what I guess they was talking about slavery, but it's hard for me to believe that when a white man can walk up to me and time and take me, which is why we're here, and we're screaming hands up. But this is not just about me, and this is not just about you, this is not about the story of what you have perceived to be the truth. This is why we're yelling, hands up, don't shoot. Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Fuck what you thought was the truth. Hands up! Don't shoot. And they be yelling, don't ever forget, but we will never forget. But if the police get to make up the laws in response to oppress us, then you're legal to stand still in a bus stop and tell me what to do. While we're learning more about the system, rules, not even the disputes, we're in a conversation on legalizing we take the war drugs. When the war is simply one side of the war against black lives, until we get shot for something determined by love after the gas station shot. For not going to door and straight neighborhood shot. For being the house where the police ready to get your parents could not be chalked down. To behave like we're from the north and to produce not knowing enough about the law. Who gets to make important life justice? Whose life is running in the many? Who gets to breathe when the hands go up and hear the words don't shoot? Who gets to walk away? Why is the one in front of the gun gets to live forever? No victim. Who the fuck was the shooter? Anti-black violence too often goes uncriticized activism and political settings. The debaters and coaches align themselves. These variables did not take their example. These violence brutality they can and frequently do technically evaluate excluding black women such as myself. The emergence of college did not mitigate inequality or the brutality of policing, just like all y'all want to do with the law, making me constantly attempt to pull the rug from under us, changing the terrain, the rules, the time, the place, the innovation, the order respond. The number of black debaters, or more appropriately, this is black success. In response to this turmoil, despite every reason to give up and not to show we are here, we are putting our hands up, telling them not to shoot us as a political form act of flip the script, although perpetuating anti-black violence, most being intrinsic values is one who's in front of the values. But when our hands go up and the words don't shoot come out, we are illustrating to you that this war is one side. We are forcing you to both of one who's holding an empty gun. And we're communicating to you that there is someone in front of the gun who is worthy of living. The role of violence is determined that formally and methodology works towards elimination of agents of anti-black violence. But act as an act of resistance to agents of anti-black violence and suicide. We are the physicians, and we know best. May 9, 2014, the distinction time for a decade between the time that until our own lives have elapsed. In 2014, you are black American walking the street and straight and trying to ask for help with someone who is likely to get you killed. We can no longer congratulate ourselves on having been rescued from the Jim Crow era. America remains a place of white women, the inability to fight around to get hands up, don't shoot. We're probably have to be define the truth of the encounters. There's no longer prerogative to numbers to define the truth about race. The difference between us and those other black people who are defined as unseemly or criminals apart within the progress that we have wrongfully accepted, or the representation of social equality of each of us become friends with the white. Somehow white perceive us as black and not enough in the shift and liberation way out of these two alliances. We thought we were pointing to the whole white men had their social conceptions of themselves. We were all doing and agreeing on where disagree and what we had in common, playing politics of racial equality, ignoring the word what could have been unneeded and different about each of our own communities. Away from your friend, a white stranger, treat you like a black person again. Stop! Don't shoot your into a competition, changing nothing for those who are white. White always do the wrong thing. Those who are not wanted. They instead of doesn't talk. The only exactly way to stop from this behavior is to kill us. This is one of the things I didn't learn to teach you. You were trying to say that's when you were shot, which is why I kill it with you. Look, you cannot stop these misbehaviors. To do so would be accordance with our subordination, which we didn't even have. Our ancestors were slaves. The military slave, the border police. What will be a little more death about racial solitude? Our society had created the white liberal in 1960 in order to provide the illusion that whites could find themselves for integrity laws and formal structures to display their community to new politics and social equality. And first, having a distinction to the white race and the white liberal irrelevant because the true racial politics no longer comes from the existing legislation. This is all the way with tradition, expectations are called for racial equality. There is no collapse. The equity, incarceration, poverty, and educational retreat have limited the ability for blacks to reward terms by which the current regime exists. You can't be both white and liberal because white is the anti-democratic restriction of community policy. First, to raise this question, the residual to the civil rights and what you think about the dislocation of racial communities produced in political institutions that compromise U.S. history, and how can we do this? What is the possibility of the absence of political equality? Unless whites who claim to be liberal seen injustice, a black experience today with an awareness of how the insecurity of black lives survive is sustained by the need of white community. There is nothing that distinguishes them from the white people who enjoy the status and expenses of blacks in society. So their individual choices at the level of the policy do not differentiate between races or but instead designate them as those who accept the language race versus society. They are really doing their job. We have to discuss how the idea of white community that sustains itself in violence continues to lie at the heart of our American democratic project. We have to be willing to change this, which is why we are here and we are putting our hands up.
Good. What does it mean to perform?
To perform means to, I mean, there's several different ways.
Like, is there a bright line to what constitutes a performance?
A performance, sure.
What would that include?
A performance is something that you like, I don't know what you're asking, like performing and performance are two.
In terms of the role of the
performativity
sure.
is totally different,
yeah,
right? I believe that I'm a performer, that we are enacting performativity, not performance.
Yeah, can you make a distinction between that?
Yeah, performativity is doing something in the now, a wider reaction, something the theory of the flesh that allows us to move in with, like, allows us to interrogate these spaces through our body, which is what the one I see at the bottom of performance.
A performance assumes that it already happened, that it happened in the past. We say that we are always performing, which is why it's performativity.
Is that true for everyone? Is everyone always performing?
Everyone is performing, but performativity is different, right? It is the verb of the noun. It is the action that you are presenting, right?
Okay. And then what does it mean to methodologically challenge something?
Right. We say you enact a method that challenges the way in which things are. We propose a method that challenges the way in which things are in the status quo.
Okay. So how does hands up, don't shoot challenge that method?
Okay, we say hands up, don't shoot, and particularly in this 1AC challenges in several different ways. One, I, as a black woman, I'm getting the 1AC of reappropriating what the hands up, don't shoot movement looks like. Two, what the community believes.
Okay,
Two, I'm flipping the script on what?
Ask you a question about that first part. Okay. You said you're reappropriating what the movement looks like. What's that look like now?
Okay, I say it looks like the 1AC now.
Okay, but before the 1AC, what was the status quo understanding of the movement?
Of the movement, hands up, don't shoot.
Yeah.
Like me and Ferguson, I used the movement as a survival tactic to make it out of Ferguson. So it was used as an immediate survival tactic, which is what it is used on outside of this ground.
Okay.
And on the streets.
Okay, so the 1AC can be reappropriated outside of this debate?
We say that the 180 is already outside of this debate, but in a different context, right? A context in which white liberalism seeks to only capitalize black men in their experience with police brutality, which we say is something that is a clear distinction from the 180, because we are not just about Mike Brown. We are about Aiyana Jones, we are about Tiffany Edwards, we are about Dorita Ray, Mia Henderson, all these beautiful black trans women and black lives who have been lost in the constant state of
okay, so I have a question about that. If it's true that white liberalism co-opts the movement about black men, why would that also not be true about black women?
Okay, we say i.e. commodification is inevitable, right? We say we are always commodified within these spaces, but it's about the way in which we can take control over our own commodification and our own images, which is what the 180 is. And not only that, but we can kill white liberals in the system of their suicide. So we saw for the way in which white liberals.
Would you defend that you would actually assist in the suicide of white liberals?
Whiteness?
Or whiteness, sure.
Yeah, I will say I assist in the suicide of whiteness. Yes, I sure do. Right. I will put the needle if I have to.
Did you change your phone?
Yeah. It's a one-off in case.
It's the only stop.
Yeah, give it here. I don't know what happened. Maybe that's
I think you have a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said it on the
Yeah, it's
okay, thanks.
I couldn't
Yes,
remember.
that would be more.
Did you open these squad laptops?
Yeah.
The ones that we had when we were there were these tiny piece of shit white ones.
Yeah, I know. I saw it like the first year.
Apparently y'all tore them up, which is why we got these.
Well, someone sold a bunch of them.
Okay, that's what happened. Who are y'all? Y'all gotta introduce yourself when y'all come in my room. What's your name?
I'm Sam.
He's saying, I'm also Sam. I'm Jackson.
Okay.
They're all from.
I figured that they were like a crew. Y'all hella these. Do it.
No, we're good.
No.
Oh.
We had messed up and yeah, we had to log on to each other's laptops and then we figured out it was the wrong one. Yeah. Anyway, a bunch of shit just happened. Did you already write me? Oh yeah.
It's not film. Not mastered.
You said it's two? You said K one
One
off.
case.
Okay.
I'm still waiting for it to pull up.
Did you? I said hello. Alright, you guys are.
It's like one, like a couple of It's that circle thing, you know what I'm talking
The
about?
circle.
I don't really know in other words. Okay, cool, we're good.
All right.
Interpretation legalization requires positive forms of regulation, dates, and intent. Other versus decriminalization, legally, they must take the step to conflict full regulation, like second possible decriminalization, just with form to advance legalization, corporate decriminalization, also sort of official recognition, license, possible regulation, those prices, those practices were one series of versus regulatory rules, I act community to one fairly local or something out there, and advising perhaps the majority of those one recognition, discovery regulation, and PAS is the involuntary termination of life in the assistance of a medical physician medicine at no date. Physician-assisted suicide and voluntary termination of one's own life, and their director and representatives of physician-assisted suicide practice providing prescription for medication for the patient use the primary intent to do in his or her own life, and violation A, the affirmative uses physician-assisted suicide as a metaphor, and B, the affirmative doesn't endorse legalization of physician-assisted suicide, rather they say they will do the procedure, and reasons to vote negative. First, limits legalization to core resolution, the affirmative skirts that discussion. They also use PAS as a metaphor, which makes it impossible to generate in the ground. No literature exists about metaphorically performing physician-assisted suicide, and shifts the field 100% towards the affirmative. Addition, not legalizing means they can make themselves the agents of PAS, which is also impossible to negate, and ground the word against legalization. The topic is the only place to guarantee negative
ground. Different laws around the country from topic areas make it impossible to generate communities against topic DAs. Refusal to lose legalization of plant tax makes it impossible to generate competition for counterplants and criticisms, even if they win the counter methods. Those are attacked and predictable based on the resolution and topicalities of voter for the reasons above default to competing interpretations. It's the only objective way to view topicality. Fakes do not weigh topicality like a dissent. That is a risk game for the affirmative and makes it impossible for negative teams to win against untopical affirmatives. We can never win the questions of debate procedure outweigh real systemic issues and no case. Incorporating white people, especially the white judge, in the hands of no choose form of white appropriation that turns the act. White people being invited into the activism incites violence against black people. Continue 14. But white people in symbolic act raising the positions further to illustrate how black people are violently targeted by police. You don't experience sanction on different gender to solidarity, considering yourself here. Another thing that I noted is I would provide further with the rally was the behavior of white people crowd. Those looks were pushing pressure concerning police officers with the cars to be passed the street, painting public property, releasing colored gas canisters with wheels. White folks supported local anarchist group was keeping the energy and efforts of the market to belong with their own interfering claims to escalation tactics used by outsiders Ferguson and white people use hands up don't shoot to feel good about themselves and prove the white agenda. T114. When I see white people seeing violent pictures of protest carrying big signs that I can't set the most space bringing unnecessary violence, thinking about how we don't and how we just need to go on to demonstrate struggle for and black people. I can't help but think that maybe they're just trying to make themselves feel better about their own purpose and manage their own agenda because of how so many people choose to participate. And end-of-life decisions are stacked against disabled bodies. The caretakers and loved ones surrounding a person inform their decision. The way they kill the disabled body matters. The half sanitizes the medical notion of the medical practice of ableism. Action 9. The most frequently cited reasons for seeking diet stem from loss of quote activities, loss of autonomy, loss of dignity. They were usually learned to be eliminated by social networks to serve their autonomy rights, dignity, from science, self-expression. People with disabilities, the data warning, suicide quotes can serve burdening others much concerning concerns about physical pain. How can families know how to wish to end their life or respond to agency fear? That's not being fear, so to present the duty of the physical administration may be worse than death. What needs to be discharged on the patient situation with the personal environment and life performance, like identity, instructor, communicate people with disabilities, their families, and their healthcare providers that people can still find satisfaction for loved ones, quickly saving money for others, perhaps be more worthy, and that necessitates eugenics and genocidal violence. Round 11. Sometimes society reacts to people with disabilities cannot live to the mythical norms with help, pity, ridicule, and ease. It results in an power structure, creates high rating for all of it. Others mainstream society is all disabled, so normal approaches with people with disability, tragic with lives, not worth the complexity, diversity, range of differences of all are erased, not ignored, or random. Same sort of normalcy, those who do not conform or silence, lumped into the category of the other felt suspicion for not conforming. Eugenics present towards disability, eugenics form normal, to support hegemony and habits, liberalism, bourgeois, class of white, able bodied, by scientists, disabilities, those with race, gender, or sexual orientation, and deeming that less than normal society can neither be normal as socially constructed. Those who committed war crimes by killing yourself like people able to inferior intelligence and Nazi people are constantly less severe convictions and actual higher criminal rates, revealing the lives being considered different from those with mythical norm. The need to maintain silent society expects those teams that normal will get through differences despite acting dominant rule to be less noticed to get out of removing themselves from view by being silent and isolated. And whiteness is the founding signifier that makes possible the concept of race itself. Treating a racial category as if it exists without reference to other races only reifies this master signifier, continuing the hierarchical white, non-white binary that causes your impacts. Rather than try to affirm a stable identity and stable symbolic system, we should embrace a performance and method highlighting the anxiety felt when experiencing the contingency of whiteness, sharded crooks, and 2K. Racial differences found in a master signifier whiteness and Christological relations to captures reference by referring back to the versus environment system. Race differences fixes only use unconscious reference whiteness, which uses the finer opposition rather than reduces workings of power. Rather focus on race traits, contingency foundations, and senses, prospects, monomies, wins, structure, sexual differences that which works the breakdown of learning provides the analytical approaches from the subject of race that determines the sex function around race traits signifier whiteness tends to continue on the sex subject by focusing on moments racial anxiety with such effects usually producing relations subjects encounter with this diversity. Whiteness, races, or human disability that secures our investment racial identity. Whiteness causes fullness, desire, whiteness needs unsuitable desire of more race subjects to overcome difference. And the 1AC is essentially a form of racial identity, but this means it always rests on an unstable ground. Identities are an impossibility marked by lack and relying on them as a form of political contestation. Only reifies the fantasy as the ability to produce racial violence in the first place. Human in one. Identity is constituted through lack structural abuse, blocking its full constitutional identity, the binarization, political topic, terms of simple opposition, reforms in place of power, to affirm immortality, crime against laws, not resistance, but reforms and elements of what is supposed to resist the laws actually reduce transgression, finding transgressions limits the possibilities of our making it politicization, falling back on the ready-made choice of frustration, and the effort of analysis for involvement in the relation of forcing mechanisms of power and passing off to officer, identity, opposition power, rather than standing binary power and identity itself, from the logic to reduce the oppositional which limits the thinking of these terms, logic, try to operate its oppositional structure by being for itself towards its obligation towards certain essential identities and resistance. Everywhere there's a search for particular differential identity with its own demands for inclusion, political, social, political, cultural rights, however, the political field is a prismatic system with multiple connections forming different between different alleged identities, and they are in opposition thus. This is possible right from the opposition, solely due to the impression of blacks by whites to some are possibly opposing the forms of structure of opposition is supposed to resist the main one causing identity, which is to truth bearing. How would this logic deal with black people identify with being black is not opposite positive stable identity, which certain political implications are essential is not closed up identity once becoming the base circles purely on essential identity on blackness and excludes those from circles from others who do not conform with these identities goes against anti-authoritarianism, and this belief in stable identities makes the one who sees a performance imbued with fantasy, one whose appeal relies on the promise of stable symbolic order. This locks us into an unbreakable cycle where violence is a necessity to cover up the lack of the symbolic order. Tribe Cox in 99. Every utopian fantasy starts with call for a scapegoat in order to consider himself. Every utopian fantasy reverse calls for its elimination. The nature of utopian structures revealed within the realization of fantasies typically that we are brought close to the right control of this humanization, fall back exploitation, and almost all utopian visions of violence and taken as were eliminated utopians based on the explanation expression of violence. It's not only because its own expression, its own creation of violence, sustained by and fed by violence, is repressed moment of all violence, which services also resurfaces in the product of the figure of the enemy, and it also turns the case hatred for the race body stems from the fantasy of a complete symbolic order. Should becomes a scapegoat for the lack of the other means to explain all of the disorder, even if they solve the oppression of one racial group's player to confront fantasy means we'll just choose another one to hate Myers and three. Subject races embodies void of the other point of the word that here would like to be perfect. That subject races only fantasy figures only there to make us think that there's such a harmonious society is actually possible. Fantasy races figures just a way of converting up the pod, possibly the whole society, the organic symbolic order of fantasy figures not there. We would have to fit in order to make the illusion we have perfect society. All the fantasy races figure does is embody the existing possibilities of harmonious or complete society and turn. Plan forces terrible choice on low-income families functionally kills those who do not afford to live. Jones and 9. One important number of uninsured Americans. We have the country 47 million people legalized suicide, where we have this kind of equal equity in our healthcare system actually puts them to run uninsured at risk for reaching for assistance. Suicide prevention tends to see out some arrest and 1 minute.
Skip the next part.
Yeah. Their attempt to strive for social change relies on damage-centered research, which harm must be proven to convince the judge they deserve. The balance strategy relies on Western notions of power that leaves marginalized communities powerless, perceived as broken. That turns the act talking 14. Damage-centered research may offer with the theory of challenge, which harm must be recorded, proven to convince an outside attitude, which is observed even as described this theory of change, colonial and flawed because it relies upon Western notion of power, scarcely concentrated, and requires this franchise communities to position themselves both singular and effective and powerless. Make change communities are left with the narrative that tells them they are broken down and had these demonstration, fascinating, telling them narratives of things troubling, imagining themselves to give voice to some disciplinary action, voice of the colonized work of the academies, to review stories, impressions of voice. There are research philosophy based inquiry because they believe that such approaches embody what it means to do social science, collection of narratives that champion values such narratives so prevalent in such science one might use science they are deep with the academies about. No need to hear your voice when I talk about it better than you can think about yourself. I want to know your story, and then I will tell it back to you in a new way. I am so called next subject than you are now. Consider my talk research. Voice comes to by legitimated by animated voice of the marginal research self is made. I by telling back the story of marginalized self and subject of voice and invite those on the margin to speak. Also say you don't speak of voice of resistance. Only speak to those things the margin of that society information moving up long. Only speak to your faith.
Are you ready, Madonna?
Yeah.
Did you want to get to that first on part?
Yeah, that was one there.
Okay, cool, Gucci. All right, so I'm gonna go to T first. How am I a metaphor? Why am I not a physician?
I mean, you have.
Why do you have to tell black women they're not physicians?
I mean,
I have told you the one that I was a physician. Are you calling me a liar?
have you gone to medical school?
Is that how we determine who's a physician?
For the top Cali argument.
Is that not Western standards of thought and ideology that determine who gets to be a doctor?
In context of the resolution, physician-assisted suicide refers.
So we only go off of the rhetoric of Western ideology for our resolution.
I don't see.
Sounds like I should follow that resolution and get those regulations, right?
No,
That's what you just
the
told me.
standards. That's not what I said. The standards.
Cool.
outlined
I'm
in
on
the
to case.
finance
Where do we invite white?
reflects
Excuse me.
the-
I'm on to case. You don't talk over me.
Okay. Sorry.
Where do we invite white people to join the movement?
It's about the possibility of it being appropriated.
So this is all your links to the case are a possibility of them appropriating.
I mean, I don't think so, right? Like, this is a specifics like how you said.
Isn't it cultural appropriation inevitable?
I mean,
Yeah.
Maybe.
So
Maybe
what's the
sometime-
no, but if you win that your method is appropriated by white people, that means it turns the case.
Okay, so how did I code this? And how do you believe that the 1AC coded disabled bodies?
Go to disabled bodies. We think that physician-assisted suicide or even metaphors of assisted suicide are
It's a forced choice on the disabled bodies because they
revise
have
that forced choice.
Like, what is the disabled body?
people who are not able.
Okay, but you define them as the disabled body. Why do you think it's useful or good to essentialize all people with this?
I don't think
into
we-
one category.
I don't
Yes,
think
you
that-
do.
I don't think that we essentialize them.
You did. You essentialized a lot of people, but I'm gonna get to that later. So who created the black and white binary? I'm on to the next question. Who created the black and white binary?
is historical construction. This is already
Okay, so how do we pop up a historical construction that was already there that we have no power over?
Sure, there are a couple of points in this. The entirety of the 1AC process is the criminalization of whiteness. The Shishardi Crooks evidence is really good on this. It says how
I really like this shit. Keep going.
well, let me explain it. I think you'll
Alright.
I disagree. But it says that when you criminalize whiteness and say that you can have racial identity
It doesn't say
outside
criminalizing whiteness, but continue.
destroying whiteness, the idea that racial identity exists outside of whiteness is what the problem is, because all racial identity is sort of like this entangled web of understanding that only makes sense under the master signifier whiteness, right? Our argument that you can kind of get rid of whiteness and therefore talk about race is something that sustains the fantasy of complete symbolic order, complete subject.
Okay, so, okay, we're not on the side. Okay, what did I tell you? When I said I'm next,
I'm sorry.
then you stop talking.
Sorry.
Okay, so why do you just say that we'll just choose to hate another person? That's your Myers evidence. So does that mean that you will always be a hateful white person?
No, that is tied to the Newman and Shishardi Crooks evidence and the Shreve-Caucus evidence. When we win that the performance of racial identity in the 1AC assumes a subject position.
And also, I got another real quick question. Where do you claim that racial identities are stable?
I mean, by saying it exists outside of whiteness, right? It's the way that you think theorize racial identity with respect to whiteness that's the link.
Are you gonna find that?
Yeah.
Sorry. 203, right? Use, I know you're able to keep it for you. Case and then framework.
Good.
This debate will come down to a question of method and performance. It doesn't matter if you have suggested a preferable model of how debate ought to operate. We are indicting that model out of the 1AC. All of Nichols' arguments go conceited about it, even if you were able to align yourself theoretically against the Dallas Servants and the Darren Wilsons within the debate community while advocating clan Texas, but leaving the fact that debate should be an inclusive space that does not stop white debaters and white coaches from constantly constantly devaluing black and brown debaters such as ourselves, which means that we have no choice but to put our hands up and scream at the top of our lungs, don't shoot, even if all of their arguments are right about why the black and white binary are bad, even if they're right about white cultural appropriation. All of the one already assumed all of that shit. We have always already been deemed and placed into the status of commodity at the point in which our McKnight evidence indicates that white life, the survivability of white folks will always come at the cost of black and brown people, which means that we must rupture that value system that has always designated us at the bottom. We do this by articulating and creating an invaluable value, that positive articulation of ourselves by ourselves that allows us to not only view ourselves as so much more than the commodities that we have deemed, but to rupture that value system in and of itself. The marketplace might always be there, that appropriation might always be there, but we can transcend that. We can steal ourselves off of the marketplace. All of your arguments about stability doesn't make any sense. She says she walked outside and was surprised that she did not fucking die, because every space that she goes to, every space that we go to is antithetical to our existence. We were never meant to survive. Tomorrow is not promised for us, which means that there can be no such thing as stability for people of color, especially in this fucking world. The only thing that we can do is attempt to take away your stability. That's the argument about flipping the script, about how whites are able to surround themselves in the comfortability to the point in which O'Donnell gets this come up here and call people of color race bodies, as if you don't have a fucking race in and of itself. That is the move of white liberalism, to imagine the fact that you are so separable from the shit, which is why they're able to indict things like whiteness, things like racism. This is the move of the white liberal who is never able to locate themselves in the intersections or the perpetuation of that violence. They never locate the I in the intersection, which means that you have to default to our affirmative, even if they win, and just add to our methodology that's outweighed by the performance, it's outweighed by the necessity to act. Now they don't have a performance, or at least their performance is not able to resolve the impacts that they are talking about. We never said that black lives are static. We are talking about how anti-blackness might be universal, but it is not horizontal, meaning that black trans individuals, black queer people, black cis individuals experience anti-blackness, but in different ways. They have in no way foregrounded the fact that they experience a static form of oppression. Your Jones evidence obviously doesn't mean we don't defend instrumental legalization. You also make an argument about how we view people of color as powerless to the tough and yang evidence. No, you have inscripted that onto us. You have the ones who have interpolated that hands up, don't shoot. It's passive meaning that you have performed that commodification. You have performed that appropriation that you have criticized. You should not allow this. You should not view this abstractly. It's not that once the plan passes, that appropriation happens. A, we don't have a fucking plan. Maybe you should update your blocks. And B, it's about the performance that just happened right now. So the appropriation is going to happen. It's only because they have done that. We have understood ourselves. Our collective resilience against the fight for survival, the fight for survival, is something that is motivating and uplifting. Hands up, don't shoot, scream the truth about the value that we have, allowing the one in front of the gun to live forever, even if they can squash it. Few of us, our argument is that the collective force of a bunch of people putting their hands up to a shooting, rising together, has made it so police and SWAT are lining up in defense. They might have tanks, they might have guns, but they realize that the people took over the power, which is what we are talking about. You also you make an argument about how white people get invited. We have not invited anyone. You have assumed allyship. That is white liberalism, and it means that you are the internal link to the impacts of itself. Also, the evidence assumes white people pre-suicide. We will assist you in the process of suicide, make you die to your own ways. Once you are forced to recognize the way in which your positionality will always trade off with black and brown death. Right? It's not that white people are privileged. It's not that you have access to a few things you can fill up in your hand or put in your backpack. But rather your life is something that comes at the cost of ours. Nothing about voting negative is able to reconcile that. We're even if they're right about how suicide assumes agreement or acceptance or voluntary nature. A, the evidence in the context of an instrumental adoption of PAS, and B, our argument is that we will make you want to kill yourself once you recognize that, or make you want to die to your ways once you recognize how unethical you before. You say hands up, don't shoot makes white people feel good. It's in the context of hands up, don't shoot abstractly, not in the context of this particular debate community. And you all know that's wrong. We have pissed off white people. There's been rhetorical public lynchings on the college policy debate about how we are fucking up this activity. We can't even finish a fucking debate tournament weekend without being told that we are ruining debate. You don't have a link argument. You also make an argument about the disabled body. Our argument is that A, this assumes an essentialist notion of what disability. B, and it can exclude the fact that racism, social construction is disabling, that black and brown individuals are constantly viewed as unable to live in a world because it is not tailored to their existence, right? To their existence. Also, we are differently able, not disabled. Then their interpretation of what that shit is something that will always articulate a negative connotation to those identities because it's always framed in a lack of something rather than us just being different than each other, which means that one we cannot celebrate those differences instead of racism. You say that we are not positioned to tell black women that they don't know what's best about them. Also, all of your evidence about being tested on violently doesn't make any sense. We would be the ones who would be tested on TSTD, see the sterilization of black women. We are flipping that script and attempting to do that same thing to whiteness, which means all of your eugenics and genocide arguments become impact terms for the affirmative. You talk about you talk about positive regulations. That's exactly the affirmative. We positively regulate, i.e., positively articulate a notion of identity of blackness. Blackness, all of their arguments about whiteness and blackness don't make any sense. Our argument is that whiteness is simply a position antithetical to blackness. It doesn't make sense for them to say because we say whiteness, we exclude black and brown individuals. Ford Zimmerman was a brown individual, but still was co-opted by whiteness, and his very move to kill Trayvon Martin was a way in which he is able to not only indoctrinate himself into whiteness, right, because he might have been a victim of racial profiling himself, but it was commitment to anti-blackness that not only got him acquitted, but also got Trayvon murdered. All of your arguments about voluntary, about people volunteering for BAS doesn't assume the power of affect motivating you to die to yourself. We say that that's something that you should take a risk on. You also make arguments about metaphorical affirmations. This is a delegitimization of the power of the 1AC. Who said shit about metaphorical? Who said shit about hypothetical? Oh, this is the real life. We are the physicians because we do know best. We place ourselves into that higher position of authority as a means to steal away the ground that you have always already had within this space. This activity is always a rigged game. Activity is always a rigged game. Your assumed objectivity is impossible because we all come from different backgrounds and positions, which means the debate should be able to accommodate those differences rather than assume a universal subject of a debate. If your limits argument are not unique, look at where you are. You are at the seat of tournament. Good luck with expecting affirmatives to be topical. This is the people's tournament, not your tournament. This means that you should allow us to control the authoritative agency to determine what goes in and outside of all of this shit. Also, your topicality argument functions as a double turn functional because you said that legalization of PAS is ableist, and then another flow said that we should defend that shit. This means that your interpretation of how debate operates is a form of disinterested politics that literally incentivizes students to be unethical, meaning that you probably are the internal link to all of your genocide and eugenics impacts because you would think those things are okay to engage in or indulge yourself in if it is strategically a good idea.
Okay. So, per your...
I did not tell you I was ready.
Are you ready? Per your interpretation, like on T, I guess, what sort of ground does that provide for us?
I mean,
Hey, my ground is lying dead on the ground. Fuck your ground. We barely get to walk on it. How about that?
We said that's not a relevant consideration in this debate. Also, don't front like you don't have a fucking anti-K or an anti-Semitism kit. Don't front.
Why is that a good ground?
Because you have shit that you can do.
It is a way in which you're able to approach the affirmative without standing your ground and just being like, there's nothing else we can say except fuck you and get out of here.
I mean,
You gonna stand your ground, O'Donnell?
What?
You gonna stand your ground? You want your ground back?
No.
Oh,
That's
okay.
So what do you?
That's
What you want?
that's not the argument. I guess
Okay.
like it seems to me like if you can talk about physician-assisted suicide outside of sort of like the traditional resolutional way.
Yeah, because we're always antithetical to traditions. Thanks for listening.
I mean, yeah. But if you can do that, I guess it seems to me like that locks us into the only kinds of arguments we can make are ones that indict your specific performance, which seems like
And our method.
yes, but it seems to me like given that the performance is so closely tied to your identity, then the only kind of criticism we can level
It's not just our
is criticism
identity.
against you, which seems like
Absolutely
a bad
not.
kind of
It would be a criticism against hands up, don't shoot as a performative political mantra that is able to not only unearth anti-black violence, but also to empower people. That is the F. There are plenty of ways in which you can engage with that argument.
Fair. That's fine. Okay. Kind of like towards the bottom of case, you make an argument that co-option is impossible because it's the cards are in the abstract and you're talking about in the context of debate. But then you make an argument a little bit above that says that it's the collective action of people putting their hands up.
Yeah, that outweighs that co-option, right? Because hip hop gets commodified. There's Nakamura, there's Iggy Azalea. That doesn't outweigh the fact that hip hop can still have transformative potential.
Yes, that's true. But how does
it's true.
Yeah, but
So that's what we just said.
but if it can be co-opted, then doesn't that just
We'll get
amplify
co-opted
whiteness?
probably.
We
Doesn't that just
We don't have the
amplify whiteness?
agency to stop that, right? You all are the ones who are so focused on what white people think about us. We have already come to terms that white people will think that we ain't shit. So it's about navigating through that inevitable violence. Not only navigating through it, but transcending it through the production of invaluable value. That's what it means to vote F.
So then how do you assist in the suicide of white people?
Because it is our production of value that literally triggers your own suicide, right? Because it is your life depends on us being not valued.
I get that, but that seems to
Do you get that?
it seems
No,
to
you
contradict what you
actually
just
get
said. That contradicts what you just said.
How?
Because you just said co-option is inevitable, and then it says, but because we will co-opt
Co-option
those
in the
values.
abstract, sure.
You
The
can't
structure
co-opt,
of-
but you cannot co-opt value because that's the shit you cannot touch, which is important to understand.
Right, but we will
That's why it allows
co-opt
us
the
to
form of
agree.
that. Whiteness will
No,
co-opt
you
the
can't
form of
touch
that.
value. Yo, you want to touch everything, but we're not going to let you touch it. That's
But
what
you
don't
just
understand.
said that. Okay, that's
Right? Yeah, can we get a flashlight back first?
Yeah. What's your reading?
I'm ready to see this.
Okay.
It just recently got translated to English, so.
What was it in before?
Italian.
Just
yeah.
Stop right.
655 a day.
How much do we got?
802 or
803.
how much do they have?
655. Yeah, just so I can check. 2 the order is tea.
Hey, McFarland.
Yeah, what's up?
They said this folder is empty.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's nothing on it at all?
Mhm.
Okay.
You good? I listen to other people they will. And then also sometimes like because I would help them make arguments. Now that's a turn.
Not once for the turn.
Yeah, judging is definitely
This
useful in that.
might work, but when it came up, it said there was documents on there, so I don't know.
Random projects.
Boom, thank you.
It works.
Yes.
Target.
Here's what I was gonna say.
Very good.
Our interpretation that topical firm has to remove legal penalties and ability to regulate the activity once it's legalized. That's our data set, it's our medicine. That evidence as a physician, since suicide is voluntary termination by the citizen of the physician, a topical affirmative to legalize this position, which assisted suicide in the United States. The court doesn't do that. They say the assist and the assisted suicide anti-black, which is 16 from saying the United States should legalize physician-assisted suicide topical. For the affirmative, the United States should legalize physician suicide for agency anti-black, which has 100 for to other options because they can still make the argument false to right and ground. Even when the topical version is not perfect, it's the reason why this is good for it because it demonstrates that there is predictable ground arguments made against the affirmative. They've also conceded a top level ground argument that should not be top kind like this had top kind of doing. Top kind of such makes it impossible for any team to question the question method. The question method one is the question method one team makes it impossible. When the top kind of debate question should be whether or not the method affirmative were to be top of the answer. That question is no, you should vote which is done. The impact is the bottom top kind should be what the impact is the bottom top kind should be way before. They can wait the affirmative. They also have to win a competing interpretation or they have to when we need to interpretation when we need to interpretation before they're able to win these type of unique office to the affirmative. They've also conceded competing interpretations means that they have to have a reasonable counter-interpretation before they're able to have they're able to access the affirmative now to make a couple arguments on case I can go across the top kind which obviously I always remember here first. The first is that is the question of method and performance. How count is the impact term? The method the impact term to the method the one I see the top version demonstrates there's a different method. The different method. The knowledge allows you to read the same. The knowledge allows you to read the same literature, but also the same debate, which means we are impact turning our question of the method, the performance part of the debate doesn't make any sense. I'm preaching the good word that you should be taught in lessons the performance. He said across examination that people are always already performing, which means the act of reading the one scene boy from top counts for performance, which means that they cannot leverage this against top. They cannot leverage this against top. They leverage this against top. They also make an argument
argument that you shouldn't tell black people how to be. I think they will also cross-apply this topic county argument is not necessarily telling you how to debate, but rather saying that there's a different method in which allows for better engagement if you're affirmative. Now, the top kind of populace in our positive regulation, the distinction of positive regulations, whether or not they legalize positions. Suicide, yes, it can be positive that you assist and just anti-blackness. However, that is not tied to legalization of positions to suicide in the United States, which means that there's no link to this argument. Obviously not a unique thing. I don't understand the link to this argument because we're in the one area to it. They say that we need the voluntary active position to suicide might be true. However, it's a question whether or not you legalize that voluntary act, which obviously one is not doing now. You should really hold high standards from what we need already say impact your topicality, but if you say that we need this, obviously double to their impact. If you meet our topical definition, then obviously unethical for you to meet that topical definition, which means there is not impacted, which means that you should not be impacting their impactors now. Now the answer to the metaphor interpretation all this argument is obvious for them. Yes, it might be true that you are not a metaphor, but that is not mean that you should not go on top of how you conceded. The second violation is that you do not legalize positions to suicide, which means that you don't violate one of the best violate one violation. They steal ground. However, this argument doesn't have a single word in it. The reason why stealing of ground is unique, we say not having access to ground is unique, there's no way that in 18th century, as every discussion, they have conceded the core question of resolution is legalization. The only way that negative teams are ever able to enter the debate is through the modifier legalization. If you look to the entirety of the case, those different states have different laws down status quo, which means that not only is it impossible for us to generate unique disagree, just saying physicians suicide is bad, how the physicians suicide is bad, but that also is exacerbated, and it's not defend legalization, so we're not able to win the office warrant against the medical waste. In addition, we are not able to win this actually the Colin Mac acting as the agents of physician assisted suicide, which is another ground argument that they have conceded any dissat that we read from physician assisted suicide only assumes that the state legalizes physician assisted suicide, and then physicians within hospitals have that carry out the procedure, not that those two independently are able to carry out the procedure, means we are not, and we're not able to do any company competitions, we are impacting the ground argument. They say that the debates always weekend, however, might be true. However, you should obviously not make it worse by saying sacrificing on top of performance. Do not allow for negative discussion. Well, they're obviously going to make our one error that we have ground truth. However, they have received a framing question from the one see that it might be true that we have ground truth. However, that ground has to be predicated and based within the resolution, which means even if we can read the anthro-criticism, that is not ground that is based within the legalization position assisted suicide. Also, they don't have to win by us reading the anthro-criticism is better than reading a specific diss as to position assisted suicide, which I've already entitled above now. They say that the objectivity, the interpretation debate, they say objectivity is universal experience. Obviously, only ensure what you have a subject position. Argument is not based off of the subject position, but it's based off of the framing of view and the interpretation is the only way to look at the actual debate and evaluate the standards of compounding without inviting judge intervention, which is conceded argument to make the limits not unique argument. Limits are not unique argument. Yes, that does not mean that you should be on top of that. Does not mean you should be top floor. Top floor, is able to solve that argument. I guarantee you that if we put more time on top of it, I'll also go for compounding against those teams as well, which means there's not an impact to that, or teams that could not impact to that argument. Also, our interpretation would be able to solve the limits on unique question because it would force or it would have affirmative teams and embrace the legalization of position systems. This is suicide now. They have to make a double turn argument. However, it doesn't make any sense. Yes, we said legalization of position suicide is good. That means our interpretation guarantees negative ground. It has guarantees negative ground to happen to all. They say that it guarantees negative ground to happen. There's also a reason why I should prefer the version of the app, because the arguments that they linked out of on the case that they proves that there are plenty of arguments that we could have made that they have shifted the focus from. They say it's not ethical. It's obviously not
not unethical to say that you should answer arguments that are predicated off of the predicated off of the resolution. We run a PAS app that we also have to answer arguments based off of ableism. That is not unethical to say that the debater should answer arguments. This argument is nonsensical. Also, there should not be any type of impact that are based within the state coming out of 1 AR. There are large enough evidence at the very end of the piece of evidence says it is important to work within the state to challenge the institutions that allow for anti-black racism to exist, which means that there's a benefit to having a topical version of the app that endorses the United States legalizing physician-assisted suicide, especially for just anti-blackness, because their evidence says that working within those systems is critical to challenge the reason why the right of structure exists in the first place. Also, you should embrace the model debate that strikes a balance between predictability and creativity, which the topical version does. The practical reality, preparing to debate within the Muhammad framework enhances education because it maximizes the collaboration and testing findings. The only reason to severely discount their impact is because those points have not been submitted rigorous testing, but only shallow gut-shot reactions given in 2003. People's engaging with the issue focused on acquiring information about and thinking hard about it would do something likely to occur that earlier rather than later in the deliberate process. While in advance in the formal discussion position may be arrived at the peripheral routes taking the economy shortcuts when shortcuts are employed. There may be inconsistencies in logical formations of positions and its contrast central routes involved. The application more deliberate effort the matter handling the way to make it more akin the internal reflective deliberative idea across the shift from online to more deeply reflective deliberation by discussion. Elements of prediscursive process elected crucial in shaping or reshaping people's actions. The process of focusing attention on top of providing information about it, inviting people to think hard about it is likely to provide a strong impetus to internal reflective deliberation, altering not just the information people have about the issue, but also the way people process that information is spread and what they think about the issue. The early steps in the process is sheer focusing on attention and issue acquiring more information, internal reflective deliberation to the process will invariably matter more the deliberate Democrats and more discursive, but I would believe the pre-discursive phase will invariably have to consider impact on changing the way jurors approach the issue. Also, I'm going to create the argument that having a plan text, specifically a United States plain text, means that we don't talk about anti-blackness. Obviously, if we were to say that legalizing physician-assisted suicide is good for population, that allows for us to just have a discussion whether or not physician-assisted suicide is a proper method for being able to challenge anti-blackness, which means that there will be debate that would be able to be had. Even if sure that people would read politics, that is still a question of the method, whether or not that method is good.
Right. Sure. Okay. What's the external impact to your top caliber? The only one that I have floated is education.
Ground. I think most of our
Like,
argument
who gives a fuck if you can't debate this? If all of our argument is that debate is already predetermined outcomes, that position you ahead.
Well, we don't think debate is a predetermined outcome.
Okay.
Which is
Because structural inequities don't exist in this activity, or what?
I didn't say that wasn't true.
Okay, so why is it a predetermined rates game?
You've beaten me before. I don't think that it's predetermined.
So because I can beat you means that there are structural positions within this activity that would privilege white speakers over black and brown ones?
You get an advantage. You got a white judge.
Okay.
I mean, you got a net benefit to your performance already.
I don't think that's necessarily true. If he doesn't find my performance of topicality compelling, then he will go back.
Okay, cool. You made an argument about why you are performing the good word that we should be topical. What the fuck does that mean? And what the fuck does that mean?
It was. What do you mean?
The good word.
We think that people should be topical. We think it's good to be
The
topical.
good word. You think it's cool to get on your whole fucking God shit in the context of this?
Your good word. You preaching the gospel of topicality to us. We ain't getting topicality church.
Okay. How does voting negative force any other untopical path?
I don't think we have to win that we force other untopical.
Then why does your limits argument matter if it's already non-unique?
We think that the method of the 1AC is bad. It doesn't provide ground for the negative team. That's the reason we reject the name. Reject the app. I misspoke, obviously.
Obviously. So I'm just curious as to why that does anything. Like, I guess, like, what is the immediate important? This is a round about performance. You have conceded that.
I haven't conceded that.
Yes, you did.
No.
Because we
that
have
was the top
contextualize it in the context of topicality too.
That was the top
You said we are a performance.
What does voting negative on topicality do for black and brown debaters in this activity?
We have read a topical version of the app that allows for black and brown debaters to be topical, but also allows for them to read.
And what does that do for them?
That allows for them to.
I have a question about your topical version of the app.
When
When has the United States been down with eliminating nations of anti-black lives?
That's funny because your own evidence says that you have to work within those institutions to challenge that structure.
Right, but it doesn't. Okay. You talking about my evidence? Let me tell you.
I'm trying to see it.
Yeah. Okay, so my other question is exactly when has the United States been down? Even if we are supposed to work in the systems, Why was the hypothetical implication of that actually
That sounds like an awesome name.
especially, excuse me?
It sounds like a really good name argument. You just
Okay.
talked about that.
What?
If the United States is bad, and you say United States,
I'm trying to say-
sounds like a negative
I'm trying to say,
argument
okay.
you can make against your
Okay. So
That is
if
not
my
accurate.
actor isn't down, why would I? If my actor hates me, why would I try to endorse that actor? That we
still
should.
haven't even pointed out in the card.
If you want.
I
Very
did
much
ask
like
you to.
Ferguson raises the questions that were central to civil rights movements. What they think through the dissolution of racial communities produced within political institutions. Later goes on to say, what is the absence of political equality unless whites come to be liberal, seeing just blacks things today with awareness shows these.
Bro, you just read my card back to me.
Yeah, that's what they told me to do. This entire last paragraph. You want to do it?
That was you mentioned
can
about
I-
common law, bro.
I just read it to you after
Yeah, I read that in my 180.
Can I get the flashcard?
Yeah, go ahead.
And the order will just be case.
Oh, okay, I got it back here. I forgot to pick it up.
And just for clarification, I'm gonna take care of the argument that we essentialize their disability on top before I go to like.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
Very good. We do not essentialize notions of disability. The evidence is simply saying that there is a particular norm of ability in the outside, and that if you exist outside of that norm, you become other. And when we say disabled body, you're speaking to existing outside of that norm. You're not talking about it. Essential disabled body that exists outside of it. You're just simply saying what it means to exist outside of the norm. You're not linked to the essentialism argument. Go to the quadrant. Extended to 2 pieces of T1 and 14 evidence, I think they're actually pretty good. It says that regardless of the value of the hand approach you have as a survival strategy, it's only going to do something that people, white people are going to come off in order to feel better, radical or appropriated for their own age, which is exactly what T1 evidence is talking about. It talks about how in Ferguson specifically things like white anarchists came in and appropriated hands up, don't shoot in the back, things like rallies, and use that to promote their own, use that to promote their own agenda. I think cross-sex is actually pretty damning on the question of co-option because they specifically say that they're affecting cause of white people to commit suicide. Then they say that white people will never listen to them. This means that they are simply that which one is a contradiction, and two, I think it means that ultimately that even it means that I think that the only way that the value that is created by hand-to-go shoot is going to be so unintelligible that it's just going to simply that it won't affect white people. It will just be commodified by white people, so they will be able to feel better about themselves, which turns the entirety of the case because it means they're not able to criminalize whiteness in the world. White people simply criminalize the basis of their strategy, simply go off the basis of their strategy in order to make them feel better about themselves, which means they don't have any particular mechanism. They don't have any particular mechanism for solvency. Continuity. This one, they make a couple of arguments about how there's no stability. They make a couple of arguments about how stability is fundamentally white. One, this is not an argument about material stability or particular living conditions. This is about the stable identity extended piece of Charlie Crooks in 2007. They have conceded a meta-level frame vision for how you should look at matters of race and surroundings. That fundamentally all racial identity is fundamentally understood in a tangled web of each other, i.e., the master signifier of white is that which initiates the entire
understanding of race, be that black, brown, yellow, or otherwise. And it is only within this larger context of whether we can ever make sense of racial identity, the very idea that we can ever get rid of the signifier of whiteness and therefore uphold one of those single identities is the exact kind of thing that Shorty Crooks Evans is talking about. The idea that you can have this kind of positive racial identity that exists outside of the master signifier of whiteness is simply that idea that you can have this sort of stable subject position, which is the exact same thing that whiteness was devised in the first place to whiteness was used in the first place to cover up. They say that by the way, they say that saying race bodies is me just being an instance of white liberalism. I'm not denying that I have a race. Whiteness is a sort of race with the idea that we can delineate black, brown, and other colored bodies from white. That very investment in the phenotype, which is what the Shorty Crooks Evans is talking about, is something that is itself that is a regime of visibility that's initiated by whiteness, or is a regime of visibility that's initiated by whiteness. There are a couple of different links to this argument. First is that one, there is a criminalized whiteness and posit a racial identity that exists outside of whiteness, and it's in and of itself an attempt to posit racial identity outside of whiteness, which is all which again affirms that idea. You have that identity that exists outside of whiteness. Next, we meet argument on topicality. That they affirm a positive racial identity, which is again that idea of a stable racial identity that exists outside of reference to whiteness, exists outside of reference to other races. Next, the next link is the metaphor of the shooter, which fundamentally says that the shooter is fundamentally one who is, they fundamentally says the shooter is whiteness, whereas it says the shooter is one of whiteness, and that the shooter should be criminalized. The idea that those two are not connected to fundamentally separate identities as they are apparent in that metaphor is exactly what we're talking about. A couple of impacts of this. First, the Stratocox 99 is the idea that you can have a stable racial identity or stable identity at all that exists. Stable identity at all is the foundation of all fantasy, because it says that the idea that we can have a stable subject position in and of itself is what is the stable subject position is what caused things like whiteness to be able to be initiated in the first place. Because it's the idea of whiteness, the idea of entirely, the idea of a master. It is the idea of race which causes which holds out the lure of the ideal subject. The idea of race is what allows us to see ourselves as a complete subject. That's the Shorty Crooks evidence, which means that the very foundation of the fantasy of race itself is what causes us to have that investment in the subject. The Stratocox evidence says that the anxiety of the very basic subject makes that perfect subject impossible, which means that there's always going to be a lack in the identity. In order to cover up that lack, the only way to lash out is by violence. That's what caused racial violence in the first place, which is what the Myers evidence is talking about, because the race body was the scapegoat for all of white people's problems. Our argument is they just affirm that same structure of identity formation, which turns the entirety of the case. They have not answered the foundation of this argument, and they should lose on. Now, go to, talking gang evidence. I think they significantly mishandle this in 2AC. It is not a passivity argument. It's about the kind of scholarship they are producing. It is about using specifically damage-centric research in the academy. The Tucking Gang and 14 evidence says that their scholarship requires them to ultimately prove to the university and the larger debate community in general that damage has been done, and that therefore some kind of damage has specifically been done. That idea of appealing to some sort of outside agent regarding that damage is something that fundamentally reifies kind of colonial epistemology, because it's always one that sees that you have to justify, because it's something that says ultimately they have to justify themselves in front of that master colonizer. This ultimately will co-opt the narratives and ignore the unique value created by that's been created by them, so that other white people are able to feel good about it. Other white people are going to be able to feel good about themselves, even if it has value for them. The very fact that you're performing that kind of damage-centric research for someone else, to be understood by someone else, in and of itself, the synthesis which is going to be collected by the university, those narratives will just be circulated amongst the university, so the white people in the university fundamentally feel better about themselves, and an injection of affirmative politics into the unit academy leads to co-option and social death. Case occupied using Berkeley, and I think president universities like Manchester and yes, and disagree with with contesting the rest of their exactly age death. Just like the county manager, social transcend amongst the rights for work on foreign alien active prowess. We social college student the whole library to education for 27 top 50 races and serendipitous and the local money actions with killed one in my life intellectual prospects are social that the least value of the university plunges into this world ideas was spread.
Yeah, 803.
Yep.
Sorry.
Brian, what's the name of the evidence you read?
I'm sorry, what?
What's the name of the evidence you read?
Let me pull it up, sorry.
Good.
Yeah, good.
Case.
You need that? Okay.
Pretty good.
This debate is a question of method and performance. We have multiple reasons as to why their methodology in this space does not leave this space, which is the reason as to why it cannot assist those people that are most affected by anti-black violence with navigating through inevitable forms of violence. Only their model of debate is sought up and is meant to uplift Ryan McFarland and Nick O'Donnell. Those are the people that we say that we should not be concerned about the money seekings, that none of your impact evidence is on the same level as ours. They have enacted and performed the violent right interpolation, i.e. that co-option of our bodies. Every time they have called us race, the other powerless, stable, or every time you have called us socially dead, we are not socially dead. We are standing right in front of you, screaming the truth about the life that we are living. That's the point of that hands going up, that we are articulating that value that you will not be able to strip away from us. They have attempted to rhetorically do that, which we say is that they're performing the impact that they seek to criticize. They say that we don't assume disability to be essentialist, but they would do that at the point in which they only refer to people with disabilities as the disabled body. They're only bodies to you. They never have a name. They never have a face. They are just those fleshy things that you get to throw around and extend on a flow. This is the disinterested type of debate that we seek to criticize. You say white people, we appropriate our shit. You still have not responded to the hip-hop argument that we made in Cross X, that white people will constantly seek to commodify and reappropriate the work of black and brown people. But why is the onus on us to be blamed for that? Why would we be responsible for that? That is victim blaming in and of itself. It is part and parcel with the degradation of black women specifically. Also, what are you other than a white person reading Tuck and Yang evidence that won this tournament last year by 2 black women? You are also the university stealing away the work and efforts of black and brown debaters. You say that white people, you said that we said white people never listen to us. You are clearly listening to us right now. Thanks for an illogical argument. We've also never made the argument that white people will not listen to us, but so that listening to us can actively enact their own suicide, because when our hands go up, you don't know what the fuck to do. Do you put them behind your back? Do you put them in your pocket? Do you put them up? And it's that moment of uncomfortability that forces you to really think about yourself in a way that understands your unethical behavior. We think that possibility is something that should be affirmed. They've already given up on you, but we say that you should not assume allyship, but you should be ready for the fucking call. If that does happen, you've also said that we have conceded how race should be viewed. A white man should never ever get to stand up in a public setting and even say that statement out loud. You don't get to tell us how we should understand the way in which race operates in the terms of our body. You've only seen us as a race body. You don't assume that we have a gender, that we have a sexuality, that we have moments of that we have things that are considered disability. You still need to answer to our argument about its disability, not disability, that we should preference language that centralizes differences and celebrates them by understanding that we are all differently able. He literally drops that argument. Means that means that they have created an inventive articulation of the oppression they seek to get rid of. Also, your argument about whiteness being a phenotype doesn't fucking make sense. I am a person of color, but I can pass as white, which means that it's not a question of whiteness equal white people. You still have not answered the George Zimmerman argument about how people of color can participate in white logic. That's what we're talking about, the suicide of white thought. You're making an argument about how race is a fantasy. Fuck you don't get to call it a fucking fantasy. All of your arguments about the black and lashing out is only demonstrated by is pretty indicative of what Ryan is doing in the truancy. You are lashing out against us because of a lack of ground that we have afforded to you, which means that you are the performance of the impact you say that we have to justify ourselves. But we black and brown people are always in a position to where we have to justify our existence before we are afforded the right to speak, unlike them, which is why we are flipping the script and forcing them to justify their participation in this debate before we give them ground. Go to topicality. We are regulating the activity of white debaters and agents of anti-black violence in this space as a means to produce a form of value for ourselves. That's the app. There's no net benefit to a top portion of the app, other than accommodating those two white debaters, right? They don't have a uniqueness argument in this debate. They've already conceded that there are plenty, literally 50 teams or more being on top of affirmatives, right? The fuck now, nothing about voting negative changes that all voting negative only sentences a black and a brown debater to that you even fucking try to read a competitive strategy with us. You are already determined and decided that was impossible. Means that you stood your ground before you even came into this space. So their predictability argument is that white thought. It is that white survivability. You cling to it. You cling to that which has always been afforded to you and are unwilling to divorce yourself from those forms of privileges. Means that you are unwilling to die in your own ways. It's not a reason to vote affirmative. Vote affirmative. But you then in arguing about why would it be reasonable, topical. These are the forms of rhetorical tropes that they throw around and never have to think about. Black people are always being unreasonable, always being irrational, always in places where they're not wanting to do all of our arguments about why we should be able to control the confines of this space is a reasonable issue. But you should defer to us. You make an argument about how you have also conceded that we are not a metaphorical legalization of the topic, which means that we can only be a tangible affirmation of the resolution. You get to, it's not just this particular round. We have had a legacy. This is Casey, and you get to debate against the hands up, don't shoot that has started from the Texas win all the way to now. You haven't even tried.
Does that count? 6:55.
I'm trying to see how this is.
Yeah. No.
Just to start after the second.
I know, my bad.
Teach. Okay.
I'm gonna do a case study.
So should we collapse this one?
Huh?
Should we collapse this?
I'm going to be answering some of the discursive.
Yo, just go. I'm gonna go. And probably they'd be like, my sheet. This is my sheet. I have sheet one. People lose it.
Alright.
I know. Okay.
A vote negative on top of counties, not a devaluation of Matt Nicholas debaters. We all understand that they are very talented debaters. Voting on top of counties, not a devaluation of them as personal people. Rather, it's a question of whether or not their method is good or bad. Top of county is obviously a disaster to the method. The method of the one of not legalizing physician-assisted suicide has multiple disasters that we will explain later. Is also voting on top of counties, not also lead to the killing of black and brown bodies. Whether it's just a question of whether or not the method in which the one is engaged in is doing is a good method that should be a debate. Now, even if they win all their discursive arguments on case, you have to weigh top kind before the top kind is an incorrect question. The question of whether or not the affirmative should happen in the first place. They have to win their top before they are able to weigh the impacts of the 1C or able to weigh the discursive advantages that a discursive advantage based off of the 1C against top cow answer. Some of the discursive arguments here, we don't link to most of them. Race bodies, or the ones who invite us to use this language. Also, the con arguments talk about race and the abstract analyzing the notion that a particular body can be considered race. The able body argument is you can see the discussion from the one here. There's a norm that constructs the able body. Anything outside that norm is otherwise. The disabled body only refers to what is outside that norm is not becoming otherwise or essentialized any disabled identity. Now the top county proper, the top conversely as to legalize physician-assisted suicide in the United States. Legalization means a removal of criminal penalties with the ability to have positive regulation. That's our Davis evidence. That's the Davis evidence physician-assisted suicide is the voluntary act of suicide with the assistance of the physician. They have conceded a top-level framing question that you should, a top-level framing question, topic is a yes-no question is not, it is a yes-no question. If we prove they are on top of them, that means that the method of one is flawed, we should, they have conceded that forcing natives to debate whether or not procedural questions of top county outweighs structural issues in the United States makes it a rigged, makes it impossible for the negative to ever challenge the question whether or not they need the resolutional burden of legalizing physician-assisted suicide, which also makes it impossible and possibly negative. They've also conceded this at the first is the ground is that they concede that absent the use of legalization, there is no way to make it bargaining type unique office. The first is topic areas are non-unique county status quo. All topic areas have different laws around the United States, which makes it impossible for any type of negative to just win a physician-assisted suicide back debate. Because there are different laws regarding notions. Legalization is a core mechanism of the topic that generates negative ground. Also, they have conceded that having magnetic be the agents of physician-assisted suicide also makes it impossible for us to generate ground because obviously there's no literature that says magnetic should not practice physician-assisted suicide, which makes it impossible for a negative team to win a disaster to the affirmative. The good win evidence is also conceded that says that you should embrace a model debate that is created, but also one that allows for discussion over the topic. It says allowing for that discussion is critical to testing the ideas of the firm. Also makes a claim that you should hold all their impactors highly skeptical because the affirmative has not been through rigorous testing to prove that there's a limited impact. The those arguments now. The top county proper. They said therefore regulation obviously answering the two and C might be true that you might be true that you have the assistant suicide of the white liberals. However, it's not a regulation that's based off the legalization of physician-assisted suicide, which means that you don't meet that distinction. There's not a union argument they can go for, which means that you should automatically default negative. They say there's no negative fix to top versus the obviously not true. Folks, you can see the top versus the average of the United States should legalize physician-assisted suicide or against the anti-blackness. It allows them to read the entirety of the 1AC. It also allows them to have the method of hands on bill sheet, but also allows for negative teams to say that physician-assisted suicide is good. Look at the case of it. They know that out of all of our physician-assisted suicide bad offers,
arguments that we can read is the topic versus the apple. The two-way argument that says that forcing to be the state is that is only proving that the topic versus the apple allows for negative things to say that using the state as that, which proves that negative, which proves that there's negative argument, and negative argument, since it comes to death, that is obvious, that was explained, and the other reason they say that we don't read competitive strategies, obviously, doesn't make sense. Topic counties is a competitive strategy. You are not topical, and you concede that you are not topical, which makes it competitive, which means that there's not this has to not engage in topic counting, engages the method of the act. Is the question of whether or not that is a good method. They make predictability. Is what I thought, first of all, this is new in the 2.1, which have a high threshold for predictability, and then 1C, which should be on the 2 as also there's not a warrant to why predictability is a form of white thought. Also, the topic versus the act to be able to solve your white thought part of the package trees that there's not impact this article, also generating negative ground. They say we always need black people as unreasonable. Also, first of all, this is a brand new argument because reasonability and reasonability was in the 1 and C, which means that the reasonability was in the 1 and C, which means you should have a high threshold for this argument. The second is that it's obviously not an argument that certain subjects are always unreasonable. The question of whether or not there's an interpretation of the topic that generates negative ground, which means there's not a link to this argument. They say that we have conceived not enough for. I obviously am not going for that violation because there's no office. I'm going for the violation since you do not legalize physician assisted suicide through United States action, which means that there's no reason that it is conceived, which means you should go negative.
I'm gonna have a question.
Yes.
Got a weasel one.
What year were you born? 94. Oh, okay. You were playing that music song.
That would be about the same kind of.
Yeah, I love the 94, right?
Yeah, I was thinking 94, 95. Since I was a freshman in high school. I bought it on tape. Yesterday, it's good. Next year it's better.
Oh, yeah.
Bigger.
Yeah.
Way better out. Yeah, happy 94 is bigger. Yeah, happy 94.
Damn it, I forgot.
You keep my fingers close. That's just.
What is it? I'm gonna go order McDonald's for the frying toast. I got it. Well, this is flat. You go. Oh, I'm talking to him. I'm so relax. Hit the fan. Y'all good? Everybody good? And we were waiting for justice for like peace. There was shit we couldn't find. Tiffany, Edwards, Renisha, McBride, Ursula, or Mike. You were always on my mind. I think about you every time that I put my hands up. So we put the script and make this drop the gun. Because it's time for us stop to having to run. The way he was accountability to the all agents of anti-black violence. We're going to look in the mirror and look and understand all the black bodies that are lying dead, all the blood that white has shed. You stood down for black people. We say the way with your money. The way he causes no gives an understanding of how anti-blackness goes to a day to gay businesses, older everyday life, and particularly mine, the way which I was literally kicked out of my own fucking home in Ferguson and had to escape in order to survive. It's something that a topical version of the way you will never get a chance to display or give an understanding of. Not only that, we think the performance of the way is something that the topical version of the perfect can never actually solve because we think the intrinsic value and the subject valuable allows us to transcend these forms of modification and the inevitable world of co-option is something that the topical version will never understand. You will never understand what this empowerment looks like with the United States. You will never truly understand why it is so powerful and aesthetically beautiful that when I put my hands up, I find value in myself and the being that I am. We're going to go into the way which this teaches what happens. We say we flip the script and we no longer give you brown. You no longer get to stand your ground. And Garland, I'm tired of fucking talking about your brown, your tarp argument. We don't even care. It's the way you fair or predictability. We say that it was never predictable for Tiffany Edwards or Rita Ray because they were fucking found dead, which is something that's a topical that predictability can never understand. We say black life is always shot in an unpredictable way. You can call this a new argument, but we think this was one he has already caused itself that life is never predicted for us. Life is never fucking fair. It is not fair that I have to debate in front of a white man and put my fucking hands up to show that I am fucking valuable. It is not fair that I have to be in a space that I'm always outnumbered. It's not fair that you get to fucking come up here and call us socially dead and think that we're race biased and use all these negative forms for articulation to describe. This is not about you debating Matt Nicole as a position, but it's about you debating our message, which is something that you're probably not fucking understand. So not only that, but you also really you think there's no limit to negate it, but our method is something that is possible to negate because it's about the way anti-black violence operates. I don't know if you fucking look around and speak to me, but anti-blackness is a huge fucking topic that is going around. Not only that, but you can see that I'm in this position. That means that no one can do the act better than me, which means your topic version can't solve. But I don't play pretend, and you cannot take me, which is something that I fucking will not do. So your form of legalization and saying that I should tell. He fucking turned himself, yo. He said that we should, on one sheet, he said, let's legalize PAS. On the fucking second sheet, he says all this shit about disability and how it's going to be problematic to the disabled body, that we even begin like legalization of PAS. But then at the same time, that makes them expand. But not only that, you have not answered the argument that Matt are making, that this is about the disabled body. These negative politicians control they continue to use another impact way which white is always operating to create, so they never looked at the eye of intersectionality. Still, I'm not understanding what exactly is your position in front of those you yet to come to terms with who the fuck you are and how your whiteness is something that is always going to be antithetical to my existence, particularly in academic spaces. You are like the modification that you seek to critique. You act as an act of assisting yourself in suicide of whiteness. You need to kill all of the thoughts that rely in your head and tell you you are privileged because of the position that you hold in society. Now, if you vote no, that means you are not ready to stop and do a self-reflection on your privilege, because what it is literally about the way in which we should regulate debate, how we should regulate whiteness, which I say something is problematic, which is why we're flipping the script of all this. We are killing white debate. I don't know if you looked around, but there's hella fucking posts about us and how we are destroying debate, which is something that's aesthetically powerful. Like Matt said, you have gotten the opportunity to debate the legendary hands up, don't shoot out. You should have took your fucking chances and did the method. I find something that's problematic, which is why I still tell you and everybody else in this fucking room, put your hands up and drop the fucking gun. Do you need anything else?
Can we get the midnight one? And do you all just have all the cards you read?
Yeah.
Let's get that.